I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the Tech Central podcast brought to you today by FuseForward. Now, we're going to be talking technology and education today with my two guests. So let me introduce them quickly. Firstly, we have Premi Naicker, who is the MD of FuseForward in South Africa. Premi is joined by HB Klopper, who is Executive Dean, Research and Institutional Partners at the Vinci Institute. Welcome to both of you, and thanks for taking the time to talk to Tech Central.
Thank you, Duncan.
Premi, let me start with you. FuseForward, as I understand it, is a company that was founded in Canada, is a partner of Amazon Web Services and focuses on several key verticals. I believe it also opened its office in South Africa about 18 months ago or so, and you've been appointed as its first leader. Tell me a bit about FuseForward and what the opportunity is it sees in South Africa.
Sure. As you said, FuseForward is an Amazon Web Services partner. We're an advanced consulting and a technical partner. So that means we've pretty much got all the certifications you need to tick the boxes for Amazon Web Services. Obviously, our background comes from systems integration, and our founder, Mark Dam, has been in the industry for many, many years. As you said, founded the company in Vancouver in Canada, and then basically saw an opportunity in South Africa. And with Amazon Web Services, building their data centers in South Africa, it was the right time to open up the office in South Africa. The AWS data centers have been live since, I think it's May, around May timeframe. So that opens up a whole big market for us, with companies now wanting to move into the cloud space. So we're a managed service provider. We help companies move their workloads into the Amazon Web Services cloud space.
So Premi, what are the market opportunities you see here in South Africa specifically for FuseForward?
So, companies are seriously looking at moving all of their systems and applications online into the cloud. Obviously, from an operational perspective, from a cost perspective, it just makes sense to do that. And I think we've just seen recently with the pandemic, it's just made it even more important for clients to move, their workloads into the cloud, especially with remote working. And the education sector is a big part of one of the sectors that we're focusing on. Hence, we have HB with Vinci today on the podcast, as well as it's my passion. Education is my passion, and so I'm part of the Vinci alumni. So it makes a very interesting partnership working with Vinci.
All right, Premi, what is your background? You've been in the IT industry for a long time, I take it?
Yeah, so I'm not going to give my age away, but I've been in the IT industry for many, many years, specifically working with American companies running Sub-Saharan Africa and EMEA, and very much in the software space. And so that's my background, well, software and media, actually. And one of the companies I worked for in the early days was Reader's Digest. Now you can see how old I am. And then with the likes of iNetBridge and McGregor's VFA.net, and then moving into the tech space with Miraculum, which is a Dimension data company.
Oh, yes.
And so just basically worked my career through now into exactly where I need to be in the cloud space.
Okay, great stuff. I remember iNetBridge, actually. They were part of Jonic, or in that stable back in the day. Yeah. Now, the Vinci Institute. Tell me, HB, tell me a bit about the institute, its background, and what it does.
Duncan, the Vinci Institute is a distance training provider. We registered as a private higher education provider, operating in South Africa, but not obviously limited to Johannesburg, where we're situated in Modderfontein. All our students are, I don't want to use Premi's words, in the clouds, but we teach them in distance, and we supplement and enhance the teaching experience with offline work sessions, and nowadays with COVID, some online, but everything distance-based, and we offer the full-fledged programs from high certificates to certificates, diplomas, BCom degrees, postgrad diplomas, and we're sitting at the end 2 master's programs and 2 doctoral programs, really from an NK5 all the way to 10. And then our student cohort, it's on our website, but interesting enough, it's a diverse group. You'll find there's obviously looking at the South African population statistics, we a good representation of that, but we're also prominent in Africa.
Okay.
And we have a lot of interaction and students from abroad. So I think in terms of diversity, for us, it's very excited to have all these discussions from all parts of the world and bring that together. So some people would argue that makes you global. I think these days, being virtual for the number of past years, if you reach people outside your space and outside your country, already global. So it's in short where we are. And most of our programs, or basically nearly all of them, are also registered as learnerships, which allow us then the opportunity to work closely with companies. So we really believe that in our co-creating and collaboration, we're really close to industry, we listen to industry. And then the last remark, all our programs are then in the space of leadership. So we're a school of business leadership focused on how we can make a difference in that fraternity. But looking at the practical side of our programs, we also engage with a lot of industry. And I think that's what's making us special. It's not just the so-called traditional universities. So it's really forward thinking, I think.
Yeah. So is it entirely remotely based? So do you have any campuses at all or any classroom tuition that takes place?
We have our campus in Modderfontein where we sit, but it's not a big campus. In fact, it's a building, so we cook from the kitchen. And when we engage with students at companies, wherever we do that, wherever center that requires, if it's not offline. So in that answer would be no, we actually don't have a campus where we have the traditional white ivory type approach that we don't have. We go to the market in their workplace where they need it, and then we also train them in that space.
Mm-hmm. So when COVID-19 hit, the lockdown hit, you guys probably managed to take this pretty much in your stride because you're remotely based, you're online based already. I imagine other educational institutions have had a torrid time of it, but how has COVID affected the Vinci Institute?
Duncan, that's a very good question. So yes, we were in the distance mode training, but the fact that COVID hit us, we also had our fair amount of challenges. I'm not going to lie about that. And challenges relates to, suddenly the staff at office, the administration couldn't come to office anymore. So we quickly went online. And we actually, I think, moved quite fast a business on that. And it was a typical month and a half to find your feet. But we quickly went through that. On the client side and the student side, students were used to offline interactions to complement the online delivery at their work of premises or the world of work, and that couldn't happen anymore. So we found that have a minor impact. But that being said, our progress during this time, we're actually very glad that we managed to grow our numbers. A lot of our, specifically at the postgraduate level that worked outside the timetable, more in a flexible format, actually progressed, made very good progress with their study because there was more time in that space. Mm-hmm. So I think as a business, we've learned also a lot during this time. We were definitely not hit as hard as many other institutions because we were already in that space. But we had some key insights and we nurture that. And I think it's good for taking that forward and really to embrace the world of online. What we've been propagating for many years ago and now forced into that space, is actually we're there and we can move forward.
Premi, let me bring you back in. The lockdown and the COVID situation we've seen in 2020, do you think that's changed the higher education sector forever? And if so, in what ways?
Well, firstly, I don't believe that the higher education sector was actually prepared for this pandemic. I mean, we've been talking about it for years and years and years, but I think institutions have not really taken this online training seriously, or the MOOCs training, and this has been ongoing for many years. But I think what's happened with the pandemic, it's accelerated the rate of actually converting to online, even though, I think these institutions weren't prepared for it, but there was some aspect of online education with like Moodle, for example, the learner management system, or Blackboard, or Canvas, I think it's Canvas that it's called.
Canvas.
So that there's been, variations of these learner management systems. But I think what's really happened here is that the institutions have not taken the time to look at how they can transform their digital landscape. You know, there's so many disparate systems that institutions are using, let alone enterprises are using. And so how do we actually integrate all of these online and offline systems? And we found that the cloud is actually a really good platform to be able to do that, to have a hybrid model, because, you know, instead of going 100% into the cloud, because these institutions don't have the funding or, you know, the money to be able to scale quickly and transform their businesses. So having a hybrid model actually works currently, I think, as HB alluded to. It's basically looking at the on-premise stuff, looking at what's already in the cloud, and then basically looking at how do we integrate these systems without reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, you know, looking at how we transform the space.
Good. Now, HB, I believe you're doing a proof of concept of some description about using the cloud in higher education with FuseForward. Just take us through what you're doing and what you hope the proof of concept is going to show.
Yeah, well, Duncan, I think, you know, to latch on to what Prem shared with us, you know, the challenges in this changing space that people never foreseen that it will happen so quickly, and maybe we were able to leapfrog technology in time to 5 to 6 years. The question is really, how do we take the learning to the workplace, and how do we integrate the learning with the working environment? So that single blendedness that Prem talked about is crucial. So it's not to have an offline-online mix to be a server or cloud-based. Is really to say, from a student journey, there's certain services that you will use online and certain services that you will use offline, and you need to allow that to choose. What I also found in that discussion, the old age notion from pedagogy to andragogy, which typical is the hot topic, will quickly accelerated into heterogogy, where you actually say become self-centered learning. And you decide, you know, what you will do online, what you will do offline, asynchronous and synchronous. So I think that's it. Now part of that learning is to, and this is what we talk about, the proof of concept, is how do we make sure that this has an impact? And an impact to obviously at the broader socioeconomic level, make a difference, to really change society, because in essence, that's the mandate of higher education institutions and what we should be able to do, not just upskilling people, but also reskilling them as we move into the era of the fifth industrial revolution. So taking the training to the individual, or taking the training to the company, or taking the training to remote parts in the country and remote parts in the continent, that's what it's all about. Now that's easier said than done. You know, if I want to train somebody at a small town in the West Coast, you know, first of all, they don't have fast internet connection. Second, you know, they're not always close to town. So there are real challenges. And I think this is where we're going to make a difference, to say, working with the partners that collaborate with us, we'll basically put, let's call it for the moment, a training box powered by solar close by, and giving them access. So first of all, if you can arrange access, you're already working towards increasing accessibility. Now, accessibility have two dimensions. One is, you know, looking at the underbuilt, are they ready to study? And that's something we'll look at preparatory programs. And the second one of access is really giving them access to the range of services to allow them to pick up the skills to use it now, not things that they're going to use 4 or 5 years from tomorrow. Basically, what they learn today, they must see today, and they must impact it tomorrow. And by starting having that immediate impact, looking at skills and shortages and opportunities in areas and communities, we actually take training to the house. And I think that's what we try and do. Is not come to the premises, come to campus. We actually want to go into their sitting and dining rooms, into their cell phones, using technology, and then say to ourselves, in this blendedness and online world, one carefully need to think about the students' learning journey, what need to happen, where and when, and apply the solid principles of pedagogy and also heterogogy and andragogy in this space, and say that's what we need to interact. I'm not sure if you want to add to that, Premi.
No, I absolutely agree. And, you know, there has this, the there has to be a paradigm shift. I think we're so used to having education in urban areas and, which is so far removed from the masses of people that live in the outlying marginalized areas. And it's looking at just like jobs, how do we take jobs into the communities and into the rural areas? We need to do the same with education. And basically, we need to look at how do we work with government, with business, and with the academic institutions to be able to do that. I don't believe that academic institutions can do it on their own. I really believe that we need to work with government. We really need to work with the community, and we need to work with business. And I think that then creates a platform for true transformation. Otherwise, if you have a single entity trying to do this, I think it's going to take forever to get this up and running. And I think right now what South Africa needs is skills to be able to get to the next level, as a country, as an economy. And what HB was saying is, we need to come up with real innovative ways to get education to the masses or the marginalized people.
I suppose a big challenge, Premier, is that many people in South Africa don't have a computer at home with an internet connection or a fixed line connection. In fact, many people rely on a smartphone as their primary way of getting online, and then via an expensive mobile network rather than through a fixed line uncapped connection. It sounds fantastic. We use technology to get education into rural areas, into areas that are underserved, that aren't near places of higher education. But how practical is it at the end of the day to actually deliver massive online courses, for example, or online education?
You're absolutely right, Duncan. That question is so pertinent. I read some interesting stats somewhere that only 5% of people in the higher education space have access to computers, and let alone internet, access to the internet or bandwidth. I mean, bandwidth, as we know, is so expensive. It's prohibitive, for people in this country to have access to the internet. Secondly, they don't have, and as you rightfully say, it's very difficult for someone to use their smartphone, or let alone a feature phone, and not everyone has access to a smartphone because of the cost again. So how do we actually bridge that gap and that divide? And I work, and HB is aware of what something else that I work with. I work with an NGO called Computer Aid International, and what Computer Aid International does is basically refurbishes computers and equipment that companies or organizations would basically throw into a landfill, or basically give away to their staff or sell to their staff. And I really believe that model has to change, because companies give access to computers to their staff. So why would you want to sell a computer that you've written off? Rather, donate it to a disadvantaged child, who can then use that computer for the next 3 to 5 years. Computers last forever. So what Computer Aid does is basically work with the likes of Dell and Mustang to basically say, how do we get affordable computers to kids and to people, so then they've got access to hardware. That's the key. Without hardware, you can't study online, as you said. Yeah. So basically, we need to get affordable hardware, computers, laptops, tablets to people. And so, more and more we're finding that there are companies that are manufacturing these cost-effective equipment, but it's still not enough. It's still expensive for the normal person. So I think we really have to come up with more innovative ways on how we get access or give people access to computers and tablets.
HB, is this how much of an issue is this for your students? Do you have to? Are you trying to provide? Do you need to provide support to them in various ways in terms of getting access to subsidized hardware, internet access, zero rating internet access, that sort of thing?
Yes, Duncan, it is the issue, and me and Premier discussed it, and we're very sensitive. But at Da Vinci, the majority of our students, and I don't have a number, but let's say 99.9% are working adults. So
yes,
and they already have access to the internet and data services. So,
yes,
but that being said, we will also see more and more that people will start to work immediately after school and then do education parallel. So initially, they will not have access. So like Premier said, it would be naive to think that, for instance, this recording, that 100 students will download that, the bandwidth don't allow that. It's a 500-600 meg data file.
Yeah.
If we look at our solution that we will take to market and we'll place selectively in high density areas, it will actually have a server or where it's hosted, and then there will not be data involved. So it's a local closed wireless network that will circulate that. And that's how you bring the cost down, and that's how you give people access. And there's already many communities experimenting with this. So we must not be unsensitive to the fact that data is still very expensive in our country, or bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, we need to work around the hardware and the medium to allow people to say, it's not your toolbox as a mechanic that keep you away from fixing the car.
Yeah.
We rather want to say, let's make sure everybody have all the tools and then give them the skills to help themselves. And, if we want to liberalize the country, we need to liberalize the internet and allow people to be able to find information. So gone are the days where they would look into the direction of the person standing in front of the class and say to each other, that person knows everything, and I must just beat the drums to the lecturer. It become a co-creation exercise. So we facilitate learning and we facilitate discussions, and that we're already doing. And by moving forward, you can bring in the industry experts. There's many ways that you can take that forward into the communities to make sure it's got the right contextualization.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to come is having a person from Europe that come in and bring a model that's irrelevant, or coming a person from Johannesburg that go and talk in the northern province and have no idea about the challenges in grassroots. So it's about carefully thinking about that learning journey, and that's what we're good at. And I think that's what me and Premier discussed many times in the past. That's what we're gonna together take it further and say, let's start making a difference, because as responsible civil servants, we need to make a difference, and there's no other choice. And we've got the solution too. We just need to take it to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So Premier, the internet and technology, actually, I suppose it's a bit of a dichotomy, because moving online can make it more difficult to access education, but at the same time, it could make it easier to access education. It does the same thing. You just need access to the tools. Once you have access to the tools, then online education is actually going to bring education to so many more people. But the barrier is actually getting the tools in people's hands so that they can actually be able to do that.
Yeah, and there's a lack of funding, and that's why I go back to saying, well, we really need government to create the frameworks, to create the foundation, and to move this forward. And it's interesting. I don't know if you read that article. I think it's NSFAS who provide the funding to university students. There was a tender out for hardware, for laptops for the students. And, again, we come up with this whole thing around corruption and crime, and the tender was cancelled. And so these kids, and nobody thinks about the kids, it's about themselves. And so we really need to move away from that what's in it for me thinking. And we all need to get together and create innovative solutions. So the future generation, the future leaders of this country actually are skilled up and are basically taken into the future. So it is our responsibility, every single one of us, to if each one of us does a little thing towards this, it goes a long way. How many of us have computers sitting at home? Maybe, 2 iPads that's outdated, or not outdated according to the kids, but, for us, we don't use it. After 3 years, we chuck it away. There's a new iPad, we buy a new iPad. There's a new laptop, we buy a new laptop. There's a desktop, it's just lying in the garage. If each one of us have to go and look at what we have, I can promise you that's a treasure on its own. And we try and collect as much as we can and refurbish it. And by refurbishing, we're also creating jobs for some micro enterprise out there. So these are the kinds of things that we really need to start looking at to say, well, how do we give back? Even if it's one computer that's sitting in my garage, that one computer goes towards the next 3 or 4 years of a child's education.
Yes.
And so it's a simple thing. It sounds easy, but actually I think we don't think about these things. We don't know how to think and how to give back. And for me, these are just simple little examples where each one of us can give back.
Yeah. Now, HB, I'm interested. I mean, you guys have been doing online education for years, but I imagine there's some very real differences between in classroom education and learning online or remote distance learning that you offer. I imagine there are particular challenges around interactivity, the student interacting with the lecturer, which I imagine is a lot easier in a classroom type of situation. As education moves increasingly online as a result of COVID, I think it was heading that way anyway, but COVID has accelerated it. Does it actually make it more challenging for learners and some types of students perhaps who thrive on that interactivity to get maximum value out of the education system?
Duncan, definitely, and I want to come back, but before I give the response to the last two sentences that you gave, I must also just, and this, maybe must be careful what I say, but a lot of the business models out there that educators use are irritating me. And I say irritating because they basically take a lecture and record that and make it available, and I download the lecture and off you go. And that's really stupid. So what we've been doing, we would say, even before COVID, in a distance space, we carefully think about the touch points and what we want to do there. So all the reading can happen offline. We even back then had short video clips, not lengthy things that the people would watch. But the moment you then engage with them in a class to class, which is no different than physical, it's not about teaching rote learning anymore. It's about facilitating discussions, getting opinions in. So that we were still able to do and now coming back to your question, what we did found is that some learners were less comfortable with technologies and they struggled. On the positive side, the typical introvert suddenly would pop a question up in the chat box. Right. And they will have this question forward, which would never happen before. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of if you look at the old way of teaching, which we long time haven't been doing at Vinci anymore. So for us, it's a good thing and we're enjoying that. And I think part of this, and Premier referred to the quadrahelic approach and how you engage with government and industry and students and communities to get the purpose. But part of the solution for us is to have a real co-creation experience and to embrace transdisciplinarity and say, I can learn from you as much as you can learn from me, as much as I can learn from Premier. And in this case, we have what we're being a TIPS managerial leadership framework, where we actually look at technology, innovation, people's and systems thinking. And by forcing people to apply those lenses to their learning, we take them out of their comfort zone. So you could go and say to economists, how does the world of technology influence? How does the world of people and in systemic thinking? And immediately you take them to a new world of discovery. And that's the key point. So in our interaction with people is almost to say, how do we collaborate? How do we co-create? And how do we cooperate? And in that discovery process, you together define the learning with clear direction in the curriculum where you want to take it. But it's the how you do that. So if I hear people recorded a screencast and they dump it online, that's old school, that's wasting time. You're losing out on the opportunity to engage with your market and say, what do you say? What have happened today? And really, to also live in the current moment and say, if the short-term budget were delayed last week and it's being announced later this week, what does that tell me? And have the discussion there and then. So you must create the open system. And that's where I'm going with my remark. And in that openness, you must really embrace the co-creation opportunities. And if you think about it like that, the online space actually allow us to now move much faster because you get the views of people that previously were quiet. You can now conveniently rope people in from different parts of the world and say, give me your 2 cents on this one, give me your opinion here, and it's all live. And you can record that, and that person that's busy at work or in a meeting can watch the recording. And there's facilitation in between, where there's chat groups and forums and touch base and Q&A sessions where you can continue that discussion. So it's not that in the past you would go to class and then following the class you would go and read the textbook and then prepare for the assessment. Now the process of Vinci is much different. You will actually prepare for the class beforehand, whether it's online or offline.
Yeah.
And then the majority of engagement happen in the class. And that, I think, it's what allows us to engage, to be agile, and to actually in this space really to be flexible by maximize the technology and seeing technology as a solution, and don't become a product of technology, which is two different things.
Yeah. Now, Premi, maybe just take us through, if you don't mind, the solutions that FuseForward brings to market. How would you work, particularly, maybe take us through the conversations you would have with higher education institutions post the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns, and what you'd bring to the table to help these organizations?
So, education for me is just not a passion of mine. I do it myself. I've just completed my PhD with HB, with the Da Vinci Institute. And, I've experienced some of the challenges firsthand myself, not just with the Da Vinci Institute, but other institutions that are studying. And being an adult learner, I have a higher expectation. I'm a business person. I know how a business should be run. And, I'm a client as well as a student, and I have certain expectations. So, at the end of the day, I think higher education institutions need to start treating their students as individuals as well as clients, because we pay a lot of money to be educated. And I find that there seems to be a disconnect between that. And as HB was saying, there's no more this student-teacher relationship. The teacher becomes the facilitator. And I'm finding that is also starting to change with regards to the whole online environment. And so what does FuseForward offer? So FuseForward basically offers a platform and the infrastructure for organizations and especially educational institutions to start engaging with us to see how we can assist them in basically digitizing their platforms and creating an online presence that's easily accessible and safe and secure. That's the other big challenge we have, is security is a major problem. We've had so many, and I'm sure recently you've read in the newspapers, so many big companies like Twitter have been hacked into. And, big banks have been hacked into, especially in South Africa. And so, how seriously are we taking personal protection of information? I mean, that's a huge problem for us, not just in this country, but a global challenge we have with cybersecurity. So what FuseForward provides is a secure environment for companies to actually move their data into the cloud. Over and above that, it's a managed service. So basically, customers work with us to be able to look after the whole infrastructure. What AWS provides is the infrastructure, but what FuseForward provides above the infrastructure is everything else. So the security, the monitoring of the systems, the BI and the analytics around, the system. So, when is our peak time? When do we increase our capacity? How much CPU utilization? Because all of this impacts the whole customer journey and the customer experience. So from that perspective, I think what we offer is a holistic solution in this digital transformation journey for most organizations. And I mean, as you know, AWS is one of the biggest cloud service providers in the world. And so we have that. And we work quite closely with AWS in South Africa and globally as well. So we've built the partnerships, we've built the relationships. And AWS's focus on the education sector, working with the likes of FuseForward and other partners, is actually it's quite an exciting space to be in, because there's a lot of support. We're looking at cost-effective solutions. We're looking at how do we scale up, because that's the other thing. That's the other problem. There's not enough cloud resources in the world, let alone technical resources in the world. So already we have a skills shortage. So companies like FuseForward work with our customers, work with our clients to guide them on this journey, because it's not an easy one. It's not people think, oh, we're moving all our stuff to the cloud. It's an easy process. It's complex, it's complicated, it's expensive, it's all of the above, it's resource intensive. And what FuseForward does is basically assist customers through that digital journey, for lack of a better word.
Sure. HB, then I think allied to that and following on from that, a last question for you. Cloud services, how important is the cloud going to be in the future of delivering higher education?
Duncan, I think that's a no-brainer. It's where things are going, because at the end, if you have a server-based application, the server can be down and there can be power failures or connection, whereas the cloud allows you to actually run that from everywhere in the cloud, and you basically can connect that. And I think cloud-based also take less data. And if you start looking at the fifth industrial revolution, you can really tap into the artificial intelligence and automation much easier, and use big data to inform you. Because at the end, and I think that's for me the beauty of this collaboration between ourselves and Premier, because at the end, you sit with different learning styles, and we must not forget that. You have people that you need to teach, and you have technology. Now, how you bring those two worlds together, I think that's where the magic just happened, and we realize, both of us have something to say and something to deliver, and if we blend that in and using the cloud, that's a solution and moving forward. So it really enables people to say, I can get access, I can get diversity, there's accessibility without any doubt, and like Premier said, besides the technology, future safety and all of that, it's also much quicker and much more reliable. And it allows you to also then really bring to the classroom the opportunity to cater for different learning styles, whether it's visual, whether it's auditory, whether it's a tactile, a person needs movement, because the technology becoming a true enabler. And I think cloud is an enabler, and we must not forget that.
Premier, any last thoughts from your side before we wrap, where you see the higher education space going in the coming years?
Yes, and I totally agree with what HB just said, that it's technology is just an enabler. I think people, and it's how do we integrate the people with the technology? Because so often we focus on one or the other. It's about how do we actually integrate the people with the technology, and also, how do we develop critical thinking skills? Because that's a big thing that's lacking with technology, and technology just expanding so rapidly. People are not thinking critically, and that's a skill that we lack as human beings, as a country, as a nation. And it says, how do we actually teach those skills? Compassion, empathy, all of those things included in the whole technology landscape, I think is equally important. So we mustn't forget that. And and I think that's where working with Da Vinci, which is pretty much a Mode 2 university, Da Vinci is about how do we look at work-based challenges? How do we look at challenges in country? And how do we then take these challenges and create innovative solutions? And that's, I think, working with FuseForward and the Da Vinci Institute is quite a lovely combination. And with the TIPS, the technology innovation and people and systems model that they have, it's how do we bring the two together and basically expand that. Yeah.
All right. Well, Premier Naicker is MD of FuseForward, and HB Klopper is Executive Dean, Research and Institutional Partnerships at the Da Vinci Institute. Thank you both for sharing your insights with Tech Central this afternoon.